The parents of the groom were shocked when they observed, during the wedding, that the bride possessed a. Upon waking up, Jonathan Howard noticed the delightful aroma of coffee and the sight of fresh roses in a vase, which he recognized as being from his own flower greenhouse. He deduced that Liz must have woken up early to tend to her beloved plants, and was probably downstairs brewing the coffee. Despite the challenges they had faced in life, Jonathan had always cherished his wife Liz. Although many people delegated tasks like brewing coffee and tending to plants, Liz always insisted on doing these things herself. Over the years, they had achieved great material wealth, with everything they could possibly need to live a life free from poverty. As Jonathan was taking in the lovely scents and sights of the morning, Liz entered the bedroom. "Good morning, my love," she greeted him with a smile. "They brought a video. Let's watch it while we have breakfast." "Sure, let's watch it together," he replied and promised to join her shortly. As they entered the dining room, they arranged everything to start watching the video. Mr. Howard took his seat at the table while Mrs. Howard poured the coffee and served her beloved. "Hey, can we call Jason now?" the father of the family suggested eagerly. "They must be awake by now." Liz laughed and responded, "You're funny, it's only 8 in the morning. They're on their honeymoon, so they won't be up so early. They'll probably sleep till the afternoon. We can call them later." The couple adored their son Jason and supported him in every aspect of his life. They accepted his failures and celebrated his successes, fostering a healthy relationship based on trust and mutual respect. Their interactions were never marked by overbearing control or aggressive tutelage. They resolved issues amicably, always maintaining a level playing field. They chose to adopt the little boy at the age of 3 and moved to a different city. They raised him as their own, never revealing that he was not their biological child. Years prior, they had experienced an unimaginable tragedy which left them devastated. 3 years later, they made the decision to adopt as a way of coping with their grief and moving forward with their lives. As they watched TV, they settled comfortably into their chairs. Jason's girlfriend came from a troubled family background, with both parents deceased and a dysfunctional family. Initially, they had their reservations about Sophie's intentions, assuming that she was only interested in money and social status. However, as they got to know her better, they grew fond of her and even welcomed her into their wealthy family. As the wedding preparations were underway, Liz, Jason's mother, became concerned that Sophie had not yet purchased a wedding dress. Jason informed his mother that Sophie was working part-time to support herself and did not want to accept money from him until they were married. Despite her reservations, Liz was touched by Sophie's independence and decided to visit her at work to offer her assistance. Upon discovering that Sophie was wasting time commuting to work, Liz and Mr. Howard insisted that Sophie move into their unoccupied apartment closer to her school and work. However, Sophie was hesitant to accept their help and insisted on buying her own wedding dress. Liz was worried that Sophie was overworking herself and offered to pick up her things and bring her to their place. Sophie was initially embarrassed and scared to be around them, but Liz reassured her that she was now their daughter and they wanted to help her build a new life. It wasn't until the wedding that Sophie began to feel more comfortable around them and speak without hesitation. At the start of the video, Liz's attention was diverted by a phone call from her son, Jason. "Hey son, how are you?" she asked. "We're good. We'll be there tomorrow," he replied. "We missed you," Lisa said softly. "We missed you too," Jason replied sincerely. Lisa requested Jason's permission to watch the video recordings without them, and he agreed. After viewing it for half an hour, Mr. Howard glanced at his watch and announced that they had to leave. They decided to watch the rest together later. Despite having no work to do that day, Lisa found herself consumed with thoughts of Sophia. She couldn't identify the source of her unease, but something was troubling her. Even after watching the video, she couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. The wedding seemed completely normal, just like any other. Sophia had a group of girlfriends huddled together in the corner. Although there were about 300 invited guests, Sophia wasn't worried about her bridesmaids, but rather something else. Later that evening, Elizabeth arrived home early and immediately replayed the wedding video from the beginning. As she watched Sophia on the screen, she couldn't help but think how stunning she looked in real life, with her dark long hair always worn loose. For her wedding, Sophia had chosen to wear an updo styled by a professional, which made her even more beautiful. As the video showed the bride and groom walking past the camera, Elizabeth paused and rewound the footage. Despite hearing the housekeeper talking to Jonathan after hearing the door slam, Elizabeth remained focused on the video. Jonathan leaned in and kissed his wife before asking why she didn't wait for him. He then sat down beside her and they watched the video in slow motion. Excitedly, Elizabeth pointed out a crucial moment, causing Jonathan to zoom in and rip off his tie in shock. They stared at the screen in disbelief. It couldn't be true. The woman on the video had a large mole in the shape of an elongated teardrop on the back of her neck, just like their daughter who had been abducted when she was only a year old. Despite exhaustive efforts, no trace of their daughter had ever been found. The police had investigated countless leads, but none had ever panned out. Jonathan had filed numerous reports with the authorities, but they always yielded the same frustrating outcome. Excitedly, Jonathan turned to his wife and asked, "Sweetheart, what is this? How old is Sophia?" "She's 1 year younger than Jason. It all adds up," replied Liz. Jonathan couldn't believe it. After years of searching and countless people trying to find their daughter, she just happened to marry their son. Liz tried to calm him down, suggesting that it could be a 1 in a billion chance. Overwhelmed with emotion, Liz buried herself in her husband's chest. After a while, Jonathan suggested they do a DNA test discreetly to confirm their suspicions. Liz agreed, wiping away her tears and telling Jonathan that she was sure it was their daughter. However, Jonathan was determined to be absolutely certain before taking any action. He decided to reach out to an acquaintance who ran a detective agency for help. After listening to Jonathan's story, the detective shook his head in disbelief, noting that the coincidence was strange. As they parted ways, the detective promised to work on the case, and Jonathan promised to gather more information about Sophia. 3 days following Sophie and Jason's return, Detective Jonathan received a call from Bruno. They arranged to meet in the park. "Your sister-in-law seems to have a close relationship with the superintendent," said Bruno. "They have some sort of connection, but I haven't figured out what it is yet. It's not romantic love. She's either afraid of him or influenced by him. We're still trying to identify who he is. He's a stranger in town, and we don't even know his name." The next day, Bruno called Jonathan again with news. "Jonathan, I'm ready to tell you everything. Can I come to your office tonight?" "Sure, come on over," replied Jonathan wearily. That evening, Bruno arrived at Jonathan's office and began to speak. "We got the results of the test. Sophia is really our daughter. I haven't told Lisa yet. I don't know how to break the news to her." Jonathan then called everyone downstairs for an important conversation. "What's going on, Dad?" asked Jason. "I'll explain in a moment. Just come downstairs and wait for me," replied Jonathan. When everyone gathered in the living room, the detective addressed the family. "Hello, everyone. I'll start from the beginning. Mr. and Mrs. Howard had a daughter many years ago. It was a momentous occasion, a much-desired and much-loved child. Due to her restless nature, the girl could only sleep well in her stroller during walks in the park. Liz would often take her daughter for walks just to get her to sleep, but Liz herself hardly slept at all. One day, while dozing off on a bench in the park, Liz woke up to find that both the stroller and her baby were missing. Despite a thorough search, no results were found. It was later discovered that a group of drunken people were also in the park at the time. Among them was a woman who had given birth to a 1-year-old girl with serious health problems due to her unhealthy lifestyle. The woman had lamented to her husband that if they had a healthy daughter, she would quit drinking. This is when they took the opportunity to kidnap Lisa's baby. A couple of weeks later, their own child passed away, but they did not tell anyone. They simply buried the child in their garden and placed Lisa's baby in their child's place. Unfortunately, the drunken couple continued their unhealthy lifestyle and soon passed away, leaving the kidnapped girl to be placed in an orphanage. It appeared that someone had switched the documents of the kidnapped girl soon after she was brought to the orphanage. Her name and birthday were changed, indicating that this was not the first time something like this had happened. The person responsible for this was the storekeeper, who had worked at the orphanage at the time of the incident and now worked at the institute. Upon hearing this, Sanja looked visibly shaken. Jason asked why he had never heard about the kidnapped girl before and where she was now. The detective replied that they would soon find out. He then showed them a picture of a man who had driven the car that took the girl away, the same storekeeper who had altered the girl's documents. At the sight of the photo, Sophia cried out and fainted. Liz rushed to her daughter's side, calling her baby girl. Jason looked on in horror at his mother's distress. "Daughter, we're married," he exclaimed, grabbing his head. He then looked at the picture. "So Sophia knows him," he added. "Yes, that's my uncle," Sonia replied, coming to her senses. "The same uncle who begged me not to tell anyone that he was my cousin. He was always inquiring about what was happening in your home, and I foolishly confided in him." "Sonia, he's the one who introduced us," Jason exclaimed. "That's right. He even convinced me to attend school here," Sonia replied. "Oh God," Jason stood up, clearly distressed. "What are we supposed to do? We can't be husband and wife," he said, as Sophia sobbed and held onto his hand. Jonathan also stood up. "It's probably pointless to keep hiding everything now. Jason, your mother and I adopted you when you were a baby. However, no matter what news comes to light now, it won't change the fact that you've always been and will always be our beloved son." That night, they stayed up for hours, talking, reminiscing, and figuring out their next steps. The following morning, the police contacted them with news that Sophia's supposed uncle had been apprehended and had confessed to his crimes. They requested Jonathan's presence at the station for his testimony. Jonathan declined, stating that everyone was home safe and sound, and they would handle any necessary paperwork. They embraced each other tightly, lingering for a few more moments. Sophia held onto her mother, tears streaming down her face. Lisa couldn't hold back her own tears, relieved that she could now embrace her daughter as much as she wanted.